after this question. So we would like to do this during this session. I start the panelists taking a very bad. I suspect that there is all the ranges that they will follow through during the session. So we will see a comparative in this kind of discussion. But before we go over to the social element, let me just remind you that the topic of this discussion is the evaluation of teacher education program. And we are using this thing very broadly to include a range of short and long-term programs to cover that time. And as you can see, I'm surrounded by distinguished experts in program evaluation. And I recently Professor and professor from EFL-U University, who is the dean of English language education there. The person really sitting next to me is Bernadette Maguire, who lives at the TEC12, and she has very wide experience with different programs. Another level is Professor Mathew from Tennant University, and she works with the students there. And the another secondary name is Tennant Professor. No. Adrian, one of my friends, freelance women consultant, Adrian, and so I've been working with research with scholars in Maharashtra on various teacher education programs, teaching projects, etc. I'm also and I thought that it's better to start by the discussion. Some class institutes allow a chance to present when they present with the target. So what I did was prepare a set of questions to begin with. The panelists could know that there are questions on the product. It's a better enough time to panelists with questions, right? So, but I hope you'll start with the discussion that we will do this. And if a little more will come to you with a glass bowl, which contains some questions, pick another question at random, and read it out aloud during the day. And then we will never see the panelists to respond wisely to those questions. So can I request the volunteer in charge of the glass bowl? Yes, please.
Why should we body a vice program on the money?
Let's just go with it again. That's a very, very simple question. Why should we bother? And why should we better teaching? It kind of reminds me of an African program, African goes in the sea. And this the children, you want them to teach you, and then say no. And he walks to the door and says, why should I bother? You already know. And it's more for that's right. And when we have a program in place, we certainly have objectives that we want to meet. And the only way we can know whether we meet those objectives is to evaluate not only the program itself, but the impact that that program has. Sort of something that came up this morning in two senior talks. We tend to be very good at evaluating the product of something. And really we should be evaluating the process, the progress, and the product. So we need to know a new program, where people are coming from, where we want them to go, and how we're going to get them there, and afterwards, what do they do with what we've given them. So there's lots and lots of stages to the evaluation, and I think that's one of the key things, or main reasons why we need to follow. When you ask the question of why should we evaluate or particularly this program? Answer is why not? What is the problem? Everybody has had a certain rationale, a certain concept, and help in developing the person also help us in rebuilding a certain now, any problem as we know as an ongoing activity should involve a certain type of evaluation.
And therefore, evaluation is important, and making use of the results of the evaluation, no doubt, are very important, but at the same time, we have to remember that there are lots of conditions which govern every one of these activities.
Thank you. I would like to do a quick reality check. When teachers test their students in the classroom, ideally it's for assessing their progress. But in a survey on what purposes tests are conducted for, it was found that teachers also test their students to terrorize them, to keep them busy, to fill in a vacant period, for all sorts of purposes. I would like to ask the panelists if they have come across, in their experience, if they have come across any other unheard of or unprecedented uses of program evaluation apart from those which we wish were there.
I will narrate one small thing. Once I was doing a workshop for teachers, and there were lots of these teachers who had come from various schools who were all sitting there. And I asked a question like, why are you, taking down notes in my workshop and doing all these activities and so on? And one of the teachers said, sir, my principal has sent me. Tomorrow he will ask a question. I have to tell him what I did today. So I am writing down the whole thing. So that tomorrow I say, this is what sir did, this is what I did. Therefore I am sitting here, I am writing down.
I'm reminded of two situations. One, a course which was a 1 day long course or 2 day long course, I don't remember now. Before you start the program, you realize that the thanks speech is already ready. So the person comes up and says, thank you very much for your highly invigorating and very useful, very satisfying and everything. Somehow that is really, the last straw for me, where everything, the usefulness of it has been declared even much before you have done the course, you have been through the course. So somehow that takes the mickey for me. The second situation is where, like Raju said, teachers come with their letters from the government. They don't know that they are attending a teacher training program. They said, Madam, we have been sent here and we need to register. But what is the program you have come for? Because we didn't hear from you earlier. But they said, no, our department has sent when we were sent last minute, and therefore we've come. And then 2 days later, they had the most unwilling, unhappy participants. And at the end of it, they say, Madam, thank you very much. But is there any evaluation form to be filled? And they say, yeah, I think there is. Please fill it up. And then when they fill it up, they say, please tell us what you want us to put there. We'll put it for you.
Yeah, Rama's just reminded me of two situations that I've come across as well. One was actually last year in November in a state in India, and I'm not going to name the state, where they asked me to send a few weeks before pre-course material that they could pass on to the participants so that the participants could prepare before they came on the course. And I thought, wonderful. So I put together a pack of pre-course material, which I sent via the British Council to the SSA in question. And on the morning of the course, when we started, the person from the SSA came in and said, can I give them their pre-course material? That's interesting. We've got a shared language issue here, or a language issue. We do share a language, except Indian English and British English. It's a bit like American English and British English. There are differences. In the hotel in Mumbai last week, I arrived. I was working in Bombay for 5 days, and I arrived at the hotel, and the receptionist said, where are you coming from? And I said, over there. So this shared language issue is a problem. The other is, and Rama's is quite similar, where they asked what to put on the evaluation form. I actually was doing a training program in another country where they handed out the evaluation form on the first day and asked the participants to fill it in.
Yeah, we have a pre-program evaluation, and that's a very productive idea, I suppose. But I feel one of the best uses we can make of evaluation is to decide how much money should be paid to the person who conducts the program. Yeah. Before we go over to the next question, I would like to remind the audience that it's an open session. So you don't have to wait for the announcement. If you have got any burning questions to ask, you can ask them at any moment, any time. And I can see one hand going up there in that corner. So there is someone in a black shirt near Vijay.
Yes, sir. This is Fatima Abdullah. I'm from Yemen. I'm a PhD scholar in EFL University. Actually, I like the questions that you began with. Actually, it is valid and directed towards the point of the conference. And you people in the panel talked about the accountability of the program itself. And how can the evaluation make sure that the program is fulfilling the objectives towards it instead of. But my question, those who are making use of the program, those who come and sit at the students and learn, they come as individuals with different needs and objectives. So if we are so much sincere and faithful to the program and to the system itself, so how far we are faithful and accountable to the individuals, how we are building on their needs and how we are effective for them. And as we are setting our evaluation sheets, do we actually give them the chance to give their evaluation sheets for us? And how can this be possible among a system who always celebrate centeredness, which is centeredness of the government rather than the centeredness of the individuals inside the classroom, the workshop trainees, and others? Thanks a lot.
That's a good question, and I think Rama would like to begin. Oh, Bernie, you have.
Yes. Thank you for your question. It reminds me particularly of a situation that I found myself in when required to train some university lecturers in a Spanish university. These lecturers were eminent in their own subject, in their academic subject, and they were being required to deliver their subjects in English. And by way of introducing the course, we gathered some information from them about their feelings with regard to what they expected to learn and how far they expected to be able to progress in terms of language in order to deliver their courses. And we of course had automatically, and it turns out stupidly, assumed that what these lecturers would need would be academic English, academic language, etc., in order to be able to produce the language necessary. But we found out to our cost that the biggest problem they had and the biggest worry they had was if they went to a conference and they met someone in the corridor, how would they be sure that they'd be able to understand what that person said to them? How would they be sure they'd be able to understand their students' questions? How would they be able to function on the transactional and social level? And this translated into a classroom situation meant that we were dealing with students who were in every respect of their English, aside from their speaking, were of the highest possible level, but when required to make a simple exchange, were not able to do so. It took us a while to believe them, which goes to show how very, very important it is to engage with the individual. As our friend here has pointed out, it's utterly vital to know those secrets, which very often is difficult to find out what's at the bottom of the worries and the preoccupations of the students on a teacher training course, such as the one we gave, and such as many I can imagine. The diversity of the worry and the preoccupation, even in terms of the sort of psychological approach to what they're going to be doing, is vital to know in order to be able to provide a decent, coherent, proper, well-structured training course. I don't know if I've gone any way at all to answering your question.
Looking at the individual participant or the trainee, I think I'm reminded of one principle, I think, which Rod Bolaitho, I think, talked about long ago, starting a program where the teachers are at. I think that's a very, very important principle. So if you begin from where they are at, then you are much more likely to respond to their needs and their difficulties and their interests and so on, than if you offered a standardized program. So that's one way, but it's a tough proposition because we are very conscious, we are very aware in India especially of standard programs being offered to all school teachers or all the state government teachers and so on and so on. So at the end, you are not prepared to look at how much it was useful to them, what they can do with it, and so on. So evaluation also becomes very dicey. But if you are constantly in touch with teachers' needs and the ground reality and so on, you are much more likely to be responding to that.
Yeah, thank you. Shall we go over to the next question?
Good afternoon, everybody. My question is related with teacher development program. We know that there are so many programs like TESOL, CELTA, TOEFL, TEFL. I heard about these terms and I myself did TESOL. But I do want to know more about this. What are the difference between all these courses? Is there any hierarchical status between all these courses?
The question is very useful, but I don't think it's relevant here. But I suggest that Adrian has a good experience of working with CELTA, and after the panel discussion, he would be, I think you'll be quite happy to answer that question after the panel discussion is over. Thank you very much. Can we have the next question?
Of course, program evaluation requires some requirements. One of them is criteria. Then, can we ask a question? What are the criteria which helps evaluators to evaluate target program effectively? Thank you very much.
It's quite a specific question. What are the useful criteria?
That's a very good question. In other words, you're asking a question like, what are we trying to evaluate? Now, there can be a number of things you can look at when you evaluate. Could it be the content of the program? Could it be the organization of the program? Could it be the manner in which the program was delivered in terms of the nature of interaction that was carried out over the program? Was there any kind of built-in assessment? Now, in other words, when we ask the question related to the criterion of assessing a certain program, it's numerous. It depends primarily on the objectives with which the program was itself set out in the first place. If I'm evaluating a program which is purely a program that was meant to train somebody in proficiency, for example, that's okay. There's one kind of testing or one kind of evaluation that goes on such a program. If I'm training a group of teachers in improving their pronunciation, for example, or problems with pronunciation, for example, that's another kind of, in other words, every program will have its own criterion, and there need not be, in fact, there should not be any fixed criterion. If I'm doing a program for air hostesses, for example, or if I'm doing for paramedics, for example. Now, every one of these programs will have its own set of criteria. So why should we go by that? However, it's very important that we have a set of criteria before we start any program. There can't be a program, you can't say that, okay, let me go and see what it's all about and then do something about it. It's okay. And after 1 hour, you don't know what else to do. Well, I've done the basics, now what do I do kind of thing. Then then they'll say, please go home. End of it. That is not the way it has to be organized. It could be any criterion, and it's a very open-ended issue as well as extremely complex.
The criteria need to be specific to the program that you're evaluating. They need to be designed to really focus on what you're trying to find out. You need to start from where the students or the participants are. You need to know what happens, not what you want to happen. You do have to have objectives, but when you assess, you need to look at what really happens, not kind of predicting what you want to happen. And you have to be very careful with the questions that the way you formulate the questions, to make sure that the questions actually target the information that you want to find out. I'm always reminded of, one program evaluation, giving you like a comparison with a non-educational situation, is at airports. When at airports they ask you, is this your bag? And you say, yes. Did you pack it yourself? Yes. Could anyone have put anything in the bag without you knowing? That's difficult, because I don't know. And if I say yes, then you'll take me off to a room at the side. And if I say no, you'll tell me I'm lying, because how could I know if you asked me if I didn't know? So that question is a trick question and doesn't evaluate what the people want it to evaluate. So writing the questions carefully, writing your evaluation tool, not only to match the criteria, to make sure you're careful is really key.
I'd just like to reiterate a little bit what my colleagues have been saying here by emphasizing the importance of planning and of the knowledge surrounding the context of the evaluation of the course that is being planned to deliver. Not only should we establish the context of the participants, but we should also establish the context of the possible students of the participants. So the more knowledge we can gather about the context, the more efficiently we'll be able to plan, and whilst retaining the flexibility that my colleagues have referred to here, establish some common ground in terms of the values that we will be operating under when delivering the course and when evaluating the course. And if the course is being evaluated by someone from outside the immediate function of the course, the evaluator should be absolutely clear on the nature of the values that we've established as common ground, I think.
Yeah, I just have a quick question to the panelists regarding criteria. The moment we start thinking about tests, we believe that all tests have at least a couple of common criteria like validity and reliability. So do you think that there are some holy criteria like that across all kinds of evaluation? And to be fair to the audience, I request you to be speaking in not more than 3 sentences.
Validity, yes. Reliability, if it goes on with the same group of learners.
I'm going to say something very simple here. We can try. We won't be perfect, but we can certainly try to be valid, and we can certainly try to be honorable.
We haven't talked about the kind of evaluation we need to do, because we stopped with a ball somewhere, I don't know. There might have been that question. If we believe that we need to include the participants in deciding on how to do evaluation and what of the program should be evaluated, which I recommend very strongly, then the participants' involvement in the evaluation process is extremely critical, and therefore there's a kind of internal consistency, as it were, internal validity, internal reliability that's being taken care of anyway.
Apparently I've got to do 3 sentences. So yes, yes, and yes.
That's the most fantastic answer. Great, great. Very enriching, very enlightening. Great. Yeah, we will have one last question on this point and we'll move ahead to other questions because possibly what you have in your mind might be covered in further questions. So just one last question over there from the gentleman.
Hello everybody, I'm Cholpon from English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. It is related to the point that you have mentioned. You said that we need to establish context of evaluation. So we need to, whatever evaluation is, it needs to be related to the objectives. But how do we come to the objectives? In order to establish that common ground, we need to analyze the needs. And today we criticize that notion one size fits all, right? But when we talk about the training programs for the teachers and training programs for the trainers, when we invite participants from different parts of the world or from different parts of the continent, how do we address this issue? Does it really happen? I mean, do we analyze the needs of each participant? Usually we do not, right? But it is supposed to be done. And how should we address this issue?
In a way, I think we've partly covered it by talking about the need to start with where the participants are. And on the first morning of any training program, you need to sit down and talk to them about their expectations and your expectations. And where there's a big gap, you need to try and find common ground and build a way of working together. Partly it depends whether it's pre-service or in-service as well. But in-service training courses often have the problem where participants are sent to the course and they don't know what the course is that they're going on. So they don't know what their expectations are. So they need to be given some information. Then they need to formulate their expectations. Then they need an opportunity to share those expectations with the trainer. And in a way, I think yesterday on the panel, I think Alan talked about this, how the different stakeholders often don't communicate with each other. And that leads to breakdown. So that's the short answer, really.
Very short, yes, indeed. Can we have the next question, please?
As Adrian Tennant sir was talking, in India, evaluation of teacher education programs have to be done at two levels. One is pre-service, another is in-service. To evaluate in-service program very well, profiling of teacher needs throughout India must be done very meticulously to map the training needs of teachers. Another important thing, process feedback is only done in most of the training programs. When the training is on, they get feedback. But after the training is over, whether it has had any impact in the grassroots level, no study has been done. It has to be kind of embedded in the system whenever training goes on. Whether it gets reflected in the classroom processes, monitoring should go on an ongoing basis.
Thanks for your comment. Can we go to the next question, where the bowl is? Where is the bowl? And can we have the next question, please?
What is program evaluation?
What is program evaluation?
It's a little bit like the question, how long is a piece of string? I suppose it depends on the objective of the particular training course in point. But just to put it, I think, as much as I possibly can in a nutshell, it's to measure the success of a particular program and to identify its areas of failure. Would that be an acceptable definition? To measure the success and to identify areas of failure. Will that do?
Can I add something? I think I would like to make a distinction between short-term goals and long-term goals. So program evaluation, what is program evaluation actually depends on what you're looking for. So if it is a short-term goal, like they all should go back happy, or they should go back enriched at the end of the program, or should feel that they have learned something, should feel that they'll be able to apply etc. So that's a short-term goal. But then I think a more important goal would be a long-term one, which is 1 year from now, is it going to have some kind of an effect or impact on what they are doing? And should it at all? Should it? And if so, is it happening? So that's, I think, is part of program evaluation, which I think we have ignored to a large extent. So there's usually just looking at very, I would say, short-term but short-sighted goals. So that, to me, that doesn't include, that's not all of program evaluation.
What's program evaluation? To me, any program evaluation seems to consist of 3 major aspects. What's been the program? How has it been carried out? And what use do we make of a certain program? The evaluation should be able to take care of all the 3, which to me seem to be organized in some kind of a cyclic order where they sort of rotate. You begin with what was the program, and therefore an evaluation of what the program was. And secondly, how was the program carried out based on what it was supposed to do? And having carried out something, how can that feed into the next program? And so it is a kind of a cyclic order, and therefore if you ask a question like, what is program evaluation? To me, it's an extremely complex task which should look into at least these 3 aspects, in addition to many other things which sort of appear as tangential features in a program, additional details which can be looked into, the specificity of certain details and things like this.
I can try and give you an example from another context, and this also addresses the long-term goals that Rama mentioned and the impact. I'm working on a project at the moment in China, which is a 5-year-long project. And we started by going into the classrooms and identifying, or looking at teaching that was going on, and identifying the needs that the teachers had, and trying to find common ground among all the teachers within that district and what they needed. And then we designed a program, and within that program we designed evaluation, different levels of evaluation, evaluating as we were going through the program at the end. But we've also designed evaluation of the impact. So I'm now watching videos of the teachers that I trained last year, and when I go back to China in a month's time, I'm doing a refresher course, working with those teachers, trying to build on the gaps between what we did last year, what they're doing, and ideally what we would like them to do in the future. And then going back again next year and the year after. And that's a very, very nice model of a program evaluation. Looking at program evaluation at the beginning, ongoing, end of the actual first phase of the program, and later on.
Thank you. I suspect from the answers panelists have given that there is no one common universally applicable answer to this question, what is program evaluation? So probably if we are going to evaluate something, it's a good starting point to clarify to ourselves what we mean by program evaluation. We have the lady in the pink right at the back, Jayashri, who wants to ask a question, and then this gentleman in the front row. So can someone hand over mic to Jayashri?
When we're talking about evaluating a program, it seems as if we expect changes, something very tangible, and say, this changed after this program. But it really doesn't happen like that. A lot of the changes are personality changes, which many of the participants don't even realize that these changes have happened within them. How do we measure these changes?
Yeah, I think it refers to the long-term impact. First of all, if we think that this program should bring about some kind of a change in the person, professionally, personally, and so on, and not just soon after the program or when the program is over, but then much after the program is ended. What is the kind of outcome you're looking for, I think, is the question. And then the other question that we need to look at, I think, when they go back to their whatever working location, should they be supported in their environment for them to be developing further with this as a starting point, or can they be in a very hostile environment and still be expected to show progress or show impact? So it's a very tricky question actually, but I think in evaluation literature at least, what is called tracer studies, are they really following communicative approaches to teaching? 1 year after, 2 years after, 3 years after, and so on. But then the question remains, under what conditions? Should they be doing in spite of a very unsupportive, hostile, unfriendly atmosphere, or are there conditions put on this, provided this is all taken care of, this teacher will be, communicatively oriented. So these it's also called life after course. What happens to their life after the course? So it's a very difficult question actually.
I think it's a very important question as well, because it's easy to underestimate the effect that certain types of training course can have on people's beliefs. And precisely those skills which are most necessary in the teaching context, such as empathy, communication, the ability to remove yourself from your so far held beliefs about teaching. Very often teachers are required to undergo a kind of revolutionary process in their thinking. Most people who work in teaching, I would say 99.9% of teachers who teach in the belief that how they are teaching is the way to do it. And sometimes to ask teachers to change their view, to change the way that they deliver their classes is a very, very tall order. Having said that, however, I think that however much or little that particular teacher takes on board what the kind of changes that they're being requested to make, it will have an effect on their teaching. I would imagine it's quite difficult to keep track of exactly how these changes take place, but no doubt they do.
That's a very important question you have raised. To me, any program, every program and its evaluation are related to the set of objectives. You may begin with the program and move towards the evaluation, or you can begin with the evaluation and move towards the program. It can be a two-way process. However, any evaluation of any program probably will have to go back to its set of objectives, the set of objectives with which it set out to do something. Now, you can ask a question like, can there be a program without any objectives? Probably when it comes to teacher education, perhaps that would be a quoting disaster. Perhaps, by and large, most of the programs would have a certain objective or set of objectives, whether they are related to beliefs or whether they're related to the pre-program kind of set of beliefs that the teachers come in with, or the kind of post-program set of beliefs that the teachers go out with, and therefore the impact of the program on the teachers or whatever it is. Any program probably should have its set of objectives, and that's where probably evaluation could also be looked upon. It could be narrowed down perhaps, depending on what exactly the program has set out to do. And therefore, it's very difficult to see a program and an evaluation in isolation. The two are related, and to my mind, it can be a two-way process, from the program to the evaluation, from the evaluation to the program.
The objectives as well need to be tied back to the pre-program planning or evaluation. And we've all sort of mentioned courses where people have come on the course without knowing what they want to do or what they're there to do. And you mentioned change. Sometimes, I mean, you can only cater for change if you actually know where you're starting from. And it's sort of like there's a Nasruddin story where Nasruddin is spraying or throwing breadcrumbs across the floor. And his neighbor comes home and he says to Nasruddin, "What are you doing?" And Nasruddin says, "I'm scaring away the tigers." And his neighbor says, "But there are no tigers here." And Nasruddin says, "You see, it works." So if you design a program to do something which is already happening, then you're bound to succeed. And that happens a lot.
That's interesting. Yes. Your question, please. Can we have the mic at the front here?
Good afternoon, everyone. What are the practical limitations of program evaluation related to English teaching, and that you want to make aware of us? Thank you.
Just to clarify, you are talking of the political limitations.
No, practical.
The practical limitations would once again go into what exactly the program is all about. For example, if it is proficiency development, then the practical limitations would be to the extent you have developed proficiency. If it is skills development, that's skills development. If it is a theory-oriented program, then that would be the kind of, as you had in the first plenary, where there would be different kinds of tests for these things. So the practical implementation of any program evaluation would be limited to the kind of practicality it wants to achieve, in the sense that, mind you, it is possible always, anytime, anywhere, to have an evaluation. Is it a formal evaluation? Is it a kind of a semi-formal evaluation or totally informal evaluation? You can always ask after meeting a certain person, when somebody asks them, "Oh, okay, how was he or how was she?" That's an evaluation you're doing, and you will casually say that, okay, I think it's all right. Or you say, no, I didn't. See, an evaluation has already taken place. So the practicality of any program evaluation will once again depend on what you want to find out at the end of the program and what use you want to make, which we discussed a little while earlier.
I would like to pose this question again back to the panelists, but in a slightly different way. I would like all of you to answer first question in one word. Do you think there are practical limitations of evaluation? Yes or no? One word. And if it is yes, then the second question, can you give one example or one kind of limitation in another word? Example of, sentence, fine, okay, one sentence. Okay, I'll be generous, yeah.
Question is, can there be practical limitations?
Do you think there are practical limitations?
To an evaluation?
To an evaluation?
Yes and no.
Yes.
No, not yes. Yes and no.
Clever answers, yes. I said one word, yes and no.
Depends is my word.
Fantastic, yes.
Mine is a yes. It's difficult.
Maybe.
I tried to surprise the panelists and they are surprising me a lot. But yes, let's look at the maybe side first and depends later. And maybe there are limitations, so can you each give one example of what limitations there can be? Practical limitations.
Practical limitations, a group of, springs to mind, a group of Spanish state school teachers who are required to follow a training course after school hours for 2 hours after an extremely long day, and just the expression on their faces presented me with a huge practical limitation. Time constraints and the attitude brought about by those time constraints.
Evaluation is such a badly abused term or notion or whatever you call it. We always shy away from doing it and doing it well. And therefore we don't do it. Or we do it by distributing a questionnaire at the end of the course, asking questions which you don't want an answer to, or you don't care. Therefore, if that's what is evaluation, we don't consider that good evaluation anyway. But you'll have to be ready to face the consequences or the results of evaluation, and that takes courage. It's not a very pleasant experience. So you'll have to be a very honest person to see it, stare it in the face. Therefore, most of us shy away from that, but I think that's the practical difficulty.
Evaluation, just like programs, is quite often badly conceived. And it's conceived in a kind of bubble of theory, or a bubble of thinking about the ideal rather than the reality. And it always reminds me of, there's a book called The Life of Pi, which is actually starts in India. And in that book, the young boy is taught to swim by his uncle. And his uncle teaches him to swim by lying on the beach in the sand and moving his arms and his legs. And he enjoys it a lot and finds it very easy. And then he goes into the sea, and swimming is difficult, so he gives up. Often this is the problem, that we do things on dry land, and when we actually put them into the water of reality, they fail. They become very difficult.
I said yes and no, in the sense that I can say yes when my poor trainees constitute a bunch of captive audience. Poor things. They are supposed to learn this. They have learned it or not. Can they do it or not? Whether it's blackboard writing or whether it's this or that. That's all. If that's the case, then yes. But no is certainly related to certain affective factors, personality factors, attitude factors, as Bern said. That is very difficult to assess. On the face of it, they might be saying excellent things to my face. Sir, very good programs, very good. I learned a lot, very nice, sir. And just outside and say useless things. I can't apply any of that in my class, and it's okay, kind of. So you see, this is where I have a problem.
Thank you. Krishna had raised his hand an hour ago, so can he have the mic? Krishna? Okay, so over to Alan. And then the lady in the back.
Practical limitations to program evaluation, the most common ones that we encounter are size, scale, and budget. If you're going to evaluate a program properly, it often doubles the training budget, because you need to send your trainers or your supervisors out into the field to do classroom observations. You've got all the travel, the potentially accommodation involved in doing that, and the time involved in assessing what is happening on the ground in the classroom. So the practical limitations can be huge, and you can't observe everybody who has gone through a program, because it's just practically impossible. You can only sample, and in sampling, there's bias inherent in the sample, in the way that you choose which schools are going to take part. They're usually the most accessible schools rather than the distant ones that might have bigger problems, and so there's an inherent bias in the evaluation.
Yeah, thank you. It's like the current craze with language laboratories, where the management budgets 10 lakh rupees for the laboratory, but not even 10,000 for training the teacher. There is a lady in the back who wants to ask a question about standards. Can she have the mic? Yeah, but can we just give a chance to some other person and then we'll come back to you.
It is just short question. My question is about who is supposed to set the standards of evaluating the teachers or teaching?
And do you think I can ask the panelists to answer in one word?
As they like.
At least to begin with, the question is who is supposed to set the standards of the teaching or teacher education program evaluation? Who is supposed to set the standards? One word to begin with? One who? Okay, fine. Go on. I'm sorry, I can't be so
The people involved.
The people involved, fine?
Yeah. If I am doing it, I.
Okay.
Somebody else doing it, somebody.
Evaluator, trainer, participant.
All concerned.
Yeah, so you have your chance to elaborate on that. Yeah.
No, I don't see much of an issue here, simply because, see, it's always the designer of a program, the person involved behind designing the program, who is also the person who is competent perhaps to evaluate it. But then he may not be a very competent evaluator himself or herself and may take help from somebody else. But the point is that whoever has designed the program, I just don't mean one person, it could be a group or an organization or an institution or whoever it is. But that is the source for not just delivering the program, but also the source which is, in my view, the source responsible for evaluation, because there is a certain degree of accountability in the evaluation. No program can go without accountability. It is accountable because the stakeholders would always like to know whether they are the organizers or whether they are the recipients, would like to know many things about the program, and therefore the organizer is responsible for the evaluation.
If you're evaluating a political program and you ask the party in power, you will get one version. If you ask the opposition party, you will get another version. The most important people to ask are the people, but none of those three versions will probably be entirely fair. So it would have to be an external evaluator to get a reasonably objective view on how a program has been delivered.
Last year I was working on a curriculum development program and project in Cambodia, and the ministry had given me a team of experts. We're working on a curriculum for 8 and 9-year-old children. I asked how many of them had taught 8 and 9-year-old children. The answer was none. How many of them had children? Half of them did. And the ones with the most strong opinions were the ones who didn't have children and had never taught 8 and 9-year-olds. In the evening, I was having dinner with the minister, and he looked at me and said, "You don't look very happy." I don't normally anyway, I'm quite grumpy. And he said, "You don't look very happy, what's wrong?" And I said, he said, "Oh, is it the group you're working with?" And I said, "Well, yes." And he said, "Well, who would you like on your team?" And I said, "I'd like two 8-year-old children, please. Because the curriculum is for them." Yeah? So that's why I say everybody involved.
Great. I think Ravi wanted to ask a question. So can we have Mike here in the 4th or 5th row?
I'm Ravi Narayan from the Regional Institute of English, Bangalore. You have partly answered this. My question was, who should conduct this program evaluation? Whether the head of the institution or the subject teacher, program coordinator, or academic specialist in the school. I mean, each one can conduct the evaluation from different perspectives, and it can be put to good use or bad use. If the teacher conducts, then the administrator may use it for a different purpose. So who should own the responsibility? And so what are the implications?
I think we tried touching on this aspect earlier. The more the insiders do the evaluation, the better, because they have a stake in it. They want a good program for themselves, and they are the best judges. and therefore they should do it. But having said that, you also want an outsider perspective, and therefore you can bring in outsiders to see how well the program has been conducted. I don't know if there's any problem about putting it to wrong use, because if there is a genuine, interest in finding out or making sure that the program is doing well, then there's no problem, there's no question of this being wrongly used or misused or anything. So I was working I'm looking at it from that framework. But if you want to make use of it wrongly, then there are very many ways of doing that. So I suppose we are not looking at that.
It depends on the system. For example, if it is CBSE and it is a class 10 examination or a class 12 examination or whatever, there is a system which works. And there are standards there. And whether you like it or not, you have nothing to do there. That's the question paper of the board, and that's where it's set in whatever format it is. Whereas you know that the class examinations and preparation for the final examination and so on are all within the purview of the teacher. However, as you yourself, your question answered many things. So kind of a rhetorical question in the sense that, every school, every principal can set certain standards for the school. There are issues where, for example, if the results are not good, the teachers are reprimanded or they're punished and so on and so forth. So in other words, yes, there are conditions which govern evaluation, just as we talk of assessment as well. But when it comes to a program evaluation, assuming that, as you said, as the chairman said right at the beginning, we are looking at teacher training programs, short-term teacher training programs and long-term teacher training programs. Therefore, there the evaluators would be certainly slightly different from the kind of evaluators that you talked about when it comes to school assessment. That's more of assessment than evaluation. Evaluation would take place somewhere else probably. Whereas if you look at teacher programs, teacher training programs and evaluation there, the criterion is slightly different.
I think it also goes back to the construction of your evaluation tool and being very careful to think about whether what you're asking is exactly the question that you want to ask and will elicit the answer or an answer that would inform you. It doesn't need to give you the answer you want. It could give you an answer that you think, okay, we need to make some changes here. And that would be fine. And again, this is a story from my daughter, with my daughter involved. She'll curse me if she sees this online. My daughter once asked me to go and get some medicine for her from the pharmacy, and she wrote it down on a piece of paper. It was hydro, whatever. And I went to the pharmacy and I said, I need some of this hydro, and the pharmacy said, oh, okay, is it for you? And I said, no, it's for my daughter. And the pharmacy said, where is your daughter going to put it on? And I said, in the bathroom, I guess. The questions have to be very, very carefully worded. Your evaluation has to be very, very carefully constructed.
I must sincerely apologize because I just got a very dark red signal from behind that we have run out of our time. And I know lots of hearts are burning with the desire to ask questions, but we can continue these questions during the coffee break. I'm really sorry because I can't discriminate and give the chance to a few. But my job was also to summarize this discussion, and Adrian made my work very easy by bringing up a cartoon. And can we have that slide? So the caption below, if you can't read it clearly, it says, the teacher says, I expect you all to be independent, innovative, critical thinkers who will do exactly as I say. That's the lesson we need to carry home with us. But there are a couple of things more. I would like, since this is an evaluation conference, I would like you to evaluate the panel. And if you, sorry? Yeah, so if you want to evaluate the panel, yeah, the reason is they are going to get the gifts if they pass the examination. Otherwise not. I will carry all those 4 home.
Please pass us.
Yeah, it's a simple question. If you feel that you found this panel discussion at least a bit useful, and the panel is very wonderful, then let's have a round of applause. Thank you very much. And as practicing teachers and teacher educators, you know how desired feedback is always collected. But then there is another part of that. I request you to tear a page off your notepad and scribble down your comments about this session. Please write down at least one thing you liked about this panel, and as many things that you did not like about it. And as you leave this hall for your coffee, leave the page with one of the volunteers. And I promise that we will all have a collective look at it. Thank you very much, and I take this opportunity to thank the panelists for their excellent contribution.
Again, there is a slight change in the program. Workshop on monitoring and evaluating inserted India challenges and possible solutions, which was rescheduled for this evening, will happen tomorrow again at the same time in hall number 3. The second point is workshop on choosing appropriate assessment tools and how the CEFR may help by Louisa Dunn will be held tomorrow in hall number G01 and 02 from 10:30 to 11:30. This is in place of session which was to be delivered by Structurin Reddy. We've found a conference bag which has a pair of spectacles, a pair of glasses. Please contact the organizer suite if it belongs to any one of you. Thank you.
Are these working? Ah, right. 2 quick announcements. The CPD coffee shop this afternoon is to be led by all the members of the CPD think tank, not Amol alone. So anyone who's a part of the CPD think tank, can you please be at the coffee shop? Secondly, anyone here from Punjab, the Punjab mentors, we're going to have a meeting tomorrow at lunchtime in room 101. So if you can bring your lunch to room 101, and we'll have a lunchtime meeting with all of the Punjab mentors and anyone who's interested in the Punjab English Development Programme. Thank you.